Who knew vanillas could teach us so much about consistency? Cimoooooooo! What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. Now, a couple weekends ago, I had the opportunity to go and help out in teaching new players how to play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it was a very humbling experience because it really took me back to the good old days of Yu-Gi-Oh! You know, back when the original anime first came out, and the game wasn't nearly as insanely complicated as it might be today, because you could argue that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the hardest card game for anyone to learn, because on top of just the fact that there's so many different types of ways to summon and all these other different types of applications, when you get into stuff like cards missing timing and chain links and all these other different things, the game can get really fucking confusing. But one thing that I noticed what was really interesting was a matter of consistency. Now, if you guys don't know, when you go to one of these events where they're teaching new players how to play Yu-Gi-Oh!, what they do is they give you what's called a demo deck. Now, a demo deck is a pre-constructed deck made up of 20 cards. I actually have one right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you what's actually inside one of these decks. Now, these decks are just pretty much the whole purpose of their existence is really just to show people kind of the bare basics of the game and how you can really kind of go on teaching someone how to play with some of the most basic cards and effects that you could pretty much assemble in this game itself. So you've got stuff like Giant Soldier of Stone, Summon Skull, which is probably your best monster because it's, 2500. Then you've got stuff like La Jin, you've got Battle Ox, Man-Eating Treasure Chest, which, I mean, God, we haven't seen that card since, like Yugi Structure Deck, Overdrive, Robotic Knight, Warrior Digrapher, Sonic Duck, then we also have the Space Mambo, then we have like Sparkman, Gilgarth, Newdoria and Gyroid, I guess, are pretty much the only two effect monsters in the entire deck. Newdoria pretty much is just for removal, and Gyroid can't be destroyed by battle once per turn, so it's a pretty good tribute summon for the Summon Skull. Then you've got your Shield Crush, your Soul Taker, and your Blustering Winds for your spell cards. So you've got a way to remove the Giant Soldier of Stone with Shield Crush, you've got Soul Taker for hard removal, and Blustering Winds to boost something up to pretty much run over something like Summon Skull if you can't get over it. And then you've also got 3 trap cards. Sakuretsu Armor, which is just classic if you ever played back, in the 2005, 2006, or 7 days. Threatening Roar, and then also Inspiration as well. Inspiration's pretty much like Rush Recklessly in a trap card. So this is basically what they use to teach newer players how to play the game. But what was really cool was, at this event, I actually promoted it and made a video about it, as some of you guys might have seen, and there was actually some players that came down to hang out, but they brought their actual decks. They weren't using these decks, they brought like their full-blown decks, and I thought that was really cool that they just wanted to come down, hang out, and actually have an opportunity to play with some other people that, they might not have had the opportunity to play with. Maybe, they just don't go to tournaments, or, whatever it may be. So what happened was, some of these players came up to me and they're like, hey, do you want to play? And I didn't have a deck to play with because I was, teaching people how to play essentially using these demo decks. So what I essentially did was I just took 2 demo decks and then I just pretty much put them together, since they're 20 cards a piece. That makes 40 cards. And then basically this was the deck that I was using to combat people's, fully constructed decks when it comes to having anything else that they were playing with. So I'm playing all these other different types of decks, and then I'm finding the struggle of playing this deck because, try outing a thing like Maiden with Eyes of Blue with a deck like this. Like, it's insanely hard to do that because, this deck isn't tailored to kind of combat these more complicated cards that we have in the game. But what I really want to get at here was something I noticed that was really interesting, and I find that it's very applicable for the game itself, whether you're a novice player or even an expert player that plays on a competitive level. This is a lesson that a lot of us can actually learn. So what I was noticing was with some of these players was that when they were using their decks, I was actually beating people with this deck. Now, that might seem completely far-fetched, but it was actually happening. And as this was happening, I was really questioning why that was, because, logically you're thinking, okay, if all these other players had these decks that are much more souped up, I mean, I was shitting myself if my opponent dropped a Luster Dragon because there's no 1900 attack monster in this deck that I can even use. So I see Luster Dragon and it's like, I have no out to this. Like, I need to like summon Skull or like Soul Taker the Luster Dragon, otherwise I can't get over it. So you would think I would just be getting steamrolled, but I was actually beating these players, and I was really curious as to why that was. And what would happen was, a lot of these players wanted me to look at their decks and really kind of evaluate, you know, how we could help improve their decks moving forward into the future, and really just kind of get them on the right track, you know, if they want to become better players. Now, what I was looking at, as I was looking at these decks, was it was really fascinating to me seeing them, because I would see, you know, granted, these are some younger players, so I mean, these aren't like, you know, experts by any means, but I was looking at their decks and I saw that they would be playing, you know, several like 7 or 8 tribute star monsters, which means that they require multiple tributes, or they'd be playing very niche specific cards that require you to have, you know, a certain card on the field to activate, or like you need to have like these really hard to achieve conditions for these cards to properly activate. And so what I was explaining to these players one after another, because this was all day, I was there for hours, and this was happening one after another. So I was explaining to these players that, you know, every card that you draw, if you're not drawing a card that can really do something on that turn, your turn is kind of being wasted, because you're having to relinquish that turn to pretty much wait to draw until your next turn and to draw something else that you can actually play, because they're playing all these cards that are, you know, what we consider dead cards, and as a result of that, it actually put them very far behind and actually allowed a deck as basic as this, which, I mean, it just seems so crazy, but it allows a deck like this that, you know, might be considered very monster heavy, but at the same time, it has like just enough removal, and it's got some pretty decent beaters in there as well, that it's continuously able to play monster after monster per turn, and, you know, unless there's really anything our opponent can do about it, you know, this deck is going to win, and that's exactly what was happening. So I was explaining to these players that if they need to just focus their decks more on cards that they want to see every single game, and they want to have as many cards be playable as possible in every game that they play. Now, I know it sometimes is really cool that, you know, you want to play something really gimmicky, and something that's just like completely over the top just because you want to pull it off and maybe show off to your friends, something like that, but that doesn't really help consistency. That's more so just a way to show off and just kind of do some cool stuff for your friends. The biggest step if you're wanting to become a better player is consistency, because the more consistent of a deck that you have, the more often you're going to see the cards that you want to see, which is ultimately going to allow you and help you win more games in the long run. So, you know, I was telling these players, reduce the number of multiple tribute summon monsters in their deck, maybe down to like 1 or 2, maybe even 3 tops, depending on what they were playing. Obviously, someone was playing like a Blue Eyes deck, so, you know, there is a lot of cards that do synergize with Blue Eyes, but it just really depends on the types of cards you're playing and how well those cards synergize. You know, on the competitive level, we have Blue Eyes, but the reason Blue Eyes works so well is because we've got cards like Trade-In to ditch the Blue Eyes out of our hand, so it's actually not a dead card. Then we've got like Return of the Dragon Lords to resurrect the Blue Eyes, so there's natural synergy. You know, you can kind of see how in your head these plays are going to play out. But I think for more inexperienced players especially, there's kind of the, you know, it's not really their fault. It's more so that they really don't understand that even though you have these super powerful monsters, you're not going to be able to play those super powerful monsters every single game, because that's really just not how the game really works, especially when you're playing on higher tiers of competitive, in the competitive realm. So I was explaining to them and really just showcasing, you want to just maximize having as many possible cards that you can play at any given moment, and this applies to the competitive meta as well. This is why you see why in the competitive meta, why we don't play so many trap cards, because unless you're playing like Paleozoic, but you know, you don't play a lot of trap cards, because what are trap cards going to allow you to do? Especially if you're going second, trap cards are extremely dead because you can't play them, which means you have less options, which means you're going to have a worse time going second and moving forward. So As basic as this may sound, this really does stretch and apply to so many different levels of play, whether it's beginner all the way up to expert, and really can just go to show that consistency is key, and by identifying and knowing that specific cards and how you want to see them, how often you want to see them, and really just analyzing and knowing how often can I play this card. If I draw this card, can I play it immediately? Any card that you can draw and play immediately is going to be a very good card, and is going to be miles ahead of a card that is very conditional, something that might require a tribute summon, something that might require you to have another card already on the field, or your opponent to have specific numbers of cards on the field, anything like that. This is just a very good lesson for anyone to learn at any skill level that I really think can help evolve you and really just kind of take you one step ahead in becoming a much more competitive player. But guys, this was just a really simple video and something I really had on the mind. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about the idea of consistency and really how it goes to show and really helps evolves players' decks, much more so on a beginner and novice level, but it also applies on a competitive level as well. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on that. It was just a random thought I had, and I thought I'd do a video on it because it was a pretty cool topic, and it was a really fun time as well. So guys, thanks so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video helpful, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.